So initially, I'd love to hear about your experience of learning how to come into relation. Well, you both articulated very clearly that mindfulness is about changing one's relationship with the pain. But to what extent has that involved love, care, tenderness, kindness, and how's that shown up for you? That's what I'd love to hear about. So Kareem, let's start with you first of all.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. I think the short answer is it's changed everything in terms of my relationship with myself and with others. Um, I think when I was identifying with my pain and seeing those thoughts as facts and that narrative as my reality, um, there was very little love there because there was a lot of pushing away, a lot of avoiding and escaping and distracting, and a lot of self-destructive behaviors. So it was not at all love-based. It was very fear-based, and just being able to put a bit of distance between my real self, that mystery of awareness that you mentioned earlier, and those thoughts and emotions about the pain, that in and of itself kind of ignited that love again, that self-love again, because you realize, okay, that person or that thing I thought I was, which is marked by pain and frustration and anger and helplessness and despair and all those things, that's not really me. That's a very hard entity to love. But the real me is actually very easy to love, because the real me can hold even that negative Nancy, that I'd become, can hold it in awareness, and can do so in, to insert the word, right, in a gentle way, in a kind way, in a loving way, in a compassionate way. So that was really, really,
So could I just
yeah,
follow a question there, because that's so interesting, because in some ways what you're describing um, still sounds a little bit not abstract exactly, but
mm,
conceptual. So what was the
yeah.
what was the how did you bring love in? How did you remember to bring in that more sort of emotional dimension?
That's a really
Or
interesting
what was
question.
what was the key? What was the key for you?
The key was realizing that I'm not my thoughts,
Okay.
and the rest kind of just followed. I think once I spent a bit more time resting in awareness and in a broader kind of awareness, I think that awareness is inherently loving,
Mm.
and it can't but come out once you give it an opportunity to. I think we spent I spent I keep on doing the we I spent so long not being aware, suppressing that side of myself, being really caught up in thoughts. So I think that realization that thoughts are not facts, which comes from observing them and the way that they arise and fall away if you let them, and that they often, we share our minds with a total crazy, well, we share our lives with a total crazy person that's our mind, right? I mean, you'll be sitting here right now, Tom could be sitting there and he could be thinking about, I don't know, tomatoes, or a trip to Italy he did 9 years ago. I mean, it's a total nutter that we share our lives with. So the more you observe that nutter, the more you realize that, okay, it's the mind is there doing a job, and it's a job that it's evolved to do, and it wants to keep us safe, and it wants to help us thrive. But unfortunately, it needs to be regulated. It needs to be managed. Otherwise, it runs away with itself. So I think that realization that thoughts were not facts, spending a bit more time being aware and holding those things in awareness, and the love kind of emerged out of that.
Mm.
But I will say that the loving kindness, if you want a very practical tip, loving kindness meditations helped. Once that started to happen, I kind of got a little taste for it, and I thought, wow, it's good liking myself again and being a bit more compassionate to myself and loving towards myself. So then I got into loving kindness
Good. Mm.
meditations, which people can Google and check out, highly recommended, to the point where I've whatever meditation I'm doing any day of the week, I will always do 5 minutes of loving kindness at the end, because it's so powerful in just helping that love that wants to emerge, really come out and flourish. And I don't know if you want me to describe what loving kindness meditation is, or people can go and look that up. But I think that's, if you want a kind of a practical suggestion of how we can bring love into our practice, and I think loving kindness is a great place to
and
start.
it's interesting at Breathworks. Half of our program is mindfulness training, and half of it is compassion, loving kindness training, and that's evolved out of my journey, where when I first learned to meditate 35 years ago, I was taught to alternate mindfulness of breathing one day and loving kindness the next day, and that they were like two wings of the bird. And I think that was brilliant. I'm so glad that my teacher taught me that. So loving kindness meditation, put very, very simply, is where we intentionally cultivate a quality of kindliness towards ourselves and others, and there are particular practices that can support that. But going back to you, Karim, I'm still so interested in so you shifted from being completely identified with the sort of content of the mind into awareness. And we know from the great wisdom traditions that awareness and love are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But you somehow that emerged intuitively for you, it sounds like. So I'm so interested. What was the experience that when you were beginning to rest in awareness, and somehow something flickered in of love? Like what was that experience? Because that's so interesting for other people to hear, I think, because I think one can rest in awareness, which is a bit alienated and cold and clinical and aloof. You can do that, but you didn't do that. Somehow something woke up in you.
Yeah, you're not satisfied yet with the answer. Okay.
Sorry.
Put me on the point. No, I think it's good. It's actually forcing me to, because this is something I might have actually taken for granted. So you're now kind of forcing me to go a little bit deeper, which is good. I think I have to credit John Kabat-Zinn. I think I have to credit, and you said, your teacher said loving kindness should be a part of this from day one. I think the role of the teacher is so important here, because my initiation into mindfulness was the John Kabat-Zinn, let's say, narrative around mindfulness. Yes. And you know him. It's love based, it's compassion based, and he doesn't, not a meditation that he guides goes by for more than 5 minutes without him reminding you of that fact. So I think that was the context I was learning mindfulness in a lot, and because it was mindfulness meditation for pain relief, and because of MBSR and what they've learned in running the programs, they know the power of self-love and compassion, and really bringing that in. So it kind of segues into the attitudes, the core attitudes that John Kabat-Zinn talks about. There was 7 originally, now there's 9 that we should try to bring to the cultivation of mindfulness, but which are also then cultivated when we practice mindfulness. And they're all, they all kind of add up, in my view, to love. Right? When you take the 9 attitudes, gratitude and generosity and patience and trust and all of those others, they kind of combine into this thing we call
juicy,
love. So
they're all juicy words, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
It isn't kind of like awareness, clarity, dispassion. They're the words he's chosen. They are words that will wake up the heart.
Yeah, totally. So I think that was what happened. But I said it was intuitive, but I think it's important to say it didn't just happen. It happened because I was practicing every day. It happened because I was making the time, prioritizing my well-being, sitting down, and I think that's so important for people. It's not just going to happen. It's not just going to happen, and we're so used to these quick fixes and the instant gratification and pop a pill or take an injection, and I think a lot of times true healing just takes a lot longer than that. I mean, this is a 10-year journey, and still working on it. I know your journey is longer, and you're still working on it.
Oh yeah, it will never end. I love it.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Yeah,
we can always go deeper, higher, broader, however you describe it. Yeah, so brilliant. Thanks, Karim. You've identified there the power of the teacher, the power of practice. So someone plants the seeds and then we water the garden, let's put it that way, within ourselves. Yeah, so how about you, Tom? This whole journey of self self-care, self-compassion, self-love. And again, I think it's great that we're having this conversation with you two as guys. And I know, and I've heard from many men sometimes talking about love can feel a bit more uncomfortable. I mean, again, I'm generalizing, of course. So yeah, how about you, Tom?
Well, it's interesting. The first iteration of this question was around relationships, and just the just need to acknowledge how difficult pain made a lot of my existing relationships, and partly because of the ideas that Karim brought up previously around my own responsibilities that I could no longer action, and the shame that comes with that, and then the fear, just to use the same words as Kareem have, but also just a kind of resentment. Like, not many, we don't really talk about this that much in this, but there's definitely a resentment from me towards just a kind of base level resentment, feeling like no one else was having to deal with this. Why me? This is so unfair, and that definitely affected my relationships at the beginning of this process. And part of what happened with me anyway, and I think it's a common experience, is then you go to these events or in-group, in-person trainings, and you meet other people who you would never know were having the same experience as you, because they look perfectly healthy. They're walking around like nothing's wrong. And that's another thing. I don't know if you had the same thing, Kareem, but well, you probably did if you by your experience in the airport, where you're walking around and I look perfectly healthy, and then you try and explain to someone, well, I can't really do that because I have this pain. People, there's a fear again that people are not going to take it seriously, or won't believe you, or think that you're making it up. It's just natural fears, but they really add up just going through your day. And it stops you engaging with certain social activities. Just in general, I can't do that. I can't do, Go Ape or whatever it might be. That's a nice.
Ape can't go to McDonald's even. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. And my favourite thing was festivals. As a young person, I would go to like 3 or 4 festivals a year, and I could go, but I'd probably have to go on the second day, or leave early, or just go to bed early, which you just can't do at festivals. So all these things that I was like, that's affecting. Not only is there this kind of shame that I'm feeling about myself, there's a resentment towards other people who I think don't have it, which might not even be conscious. And then there's also just the missing out on certain social engagements, and then the sadness around that, and the kind of that all that feeding into this narrative that's making everything much worse. And even my romantic relationship at the time was definitely affected by it, because for all of those reasons, there's a growing sense of like unfairness, and this person can't possibly understand, even though they're trying, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that definitely is the kind of the real experience before you learn to expect that. That's one of the things that that first week of the Breathworks course does with the cushions. Not to give any spoilers away, but there's something that happens there where you learn to almost expect that, and that is actually the major cause of your suffering, not the actual experience of pain.
Yeah, so just to people who don't know, it's really it's an exercise around what we call primary and secondary suffering. So you have your primary suffering, which is the sensations, and then all the things that pile up on top: the resentment, the guilt, the fear, the tension, and so on. Yeah, so that's what Tom's referring to there. So Tom, so you've articulated very well how it impacted your relationships, and everyone will be able to relate to what you're saying. It's not fair, and therefore I resent you because you can do these things that I can't do. But you put that so well, which I'm sure we've all experienced. And has part of your journey involved learning to just love yourself more as you are? Like, this word love, how does that land with you in terms of yourself?
Yeah, and again, just to use that at the very beginning of what Kareem was saying, you were saying about how there was a fear response, a fear reaction to the experience. And another thing that you said there, which really resonated, was that the mode of awareness, of becoming more aware, is naturally one of love. And I think that, just to go deeper into that, there's that the fear response is one of shutting down and closing down and protecting. And why this is quite a brave thing to do is that the opposite is this curiosity. And for me, like, curiosity really is the most important word in all of it. It's the one that for me just really opened my eyes to how it works, where it's like no longer a closing down. The first, rather than jumping into love, which was just way too difficult for me at the beginning, partly because I'm a man possibly, but partly just because it's like, well, how do I get that? I'm not feeling that right now. You're telling me to feel it. I can't do that. And then, so for me, it was that the gateway drug is curiosity, where you're going, okay, let's just be curious about this. And that naturally opens the floodgates for this different kind of awareness that is, as Karim was saying, naturally more loving. And so for me, it's a lot easier, definitely, to be loving towards other people. Loving myself is still something that requires a lot of work. And yeah, I think that naturally there's still an element for me in the striving, in the no, this is about moving forwards and getting through this and getting past this, and all of that stuff comes down to natural negative thoughts that you might have about yourself. I mentioned earlier that I'd had depression, I'd had anxiety, I had a stomach ulcer when I was 22 because of the stress I was putting myself under to perform well at work and things like that. That all comes from a deeper thinking of, I'm not good enough, I must prove myself. And so yeah, that's been the toughest challenge for me, is allowing myself to feel good about myself. But I don't know if it's mindfulness or just age, but I'm definitely a lot better at it now than I was 10, 12 years ago. But
and just to come in there, whether it's mindfulness or age, what's really beautiful is that there is a trajectory towards greater care or greater
definitely
acceptance, whatever it might be. And very beautiful the way you found this word curiosity. You said that's your drug. That's brilliant. And that speaks to, maybe we all need to find what word resonates for this kind of, rather than being in this fear state, something a bit more sort of embracing. And I find that very inspiring, that for you the word was curiosity.
I think it was actually, I can't remember who said it, but I remember it being a light bulb moment for me. And in terms of the gateway, just to go back to that, like, self-love thing, just as the gateway to a loving awareness is just being curious, just allowing yourself to be curious, giving yourself permission to be curious about this experience right now. The gateway for any experiences of just self-acceptance and self-love for me has been by first going into sharing that to other people.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And you asked Karim, and that got me thinking about, what was your first experience of that, or what was that experience like? And it certainly wasn't my first experience, but it's something that I still do to this day, which is, I find the verbal stuff very difficult. It just simply does not work for me when we are encouraged in meditation to say, and I know it works really well for other people, but when we're encouraged to say, may you feel love, may you feel happy, that just does absolutely zero for me internally, the verbal stuff. What really works for me is visualization. And a really good example of this, and something I still do to this day, is I came on a retreat with you, Vidyamala, and your partner Sona, and he got us to do these beams of love. Right on the way home, we were encouraged to send beams of love while we're driving home to people in other cars, and probably wasn't my first experience of using visualization to kind of help that experience, but it's certainly one that resonated with me, it stuck with me. And so we'll get into nature in a moment, but I try to do this walk every day near my house, and there's a cliff where you can actually see Manchester, and you can actually see my brother's block of flats. And so I'm always making a point of stopping there and just doing what Sam has said of becoming centered and just sending a beam of love from your heart as you're breathing out. Because you said this beautiful thing there about the two wings of the bird, which are the breath awareness and the loving awareness. And if you tie those to your breath, so you breathe into your heart and then breathe out as though that's coming through your heart into other people, for me that literally is an immediate state shift now. Probably took a while to get to that. I don't want to overpromise people who are going to go and try that, but
I think
it's
what
immediate state shift.
Yeah, and again, I think what you're articulating is we need to find our own doorways.
Yeah.
So you found the word curiosity, and then the visualization works really well for you, rather than, may you be well, may you be happy. So we all need to find our own way. And I think as well, you've articulated the stance between self and other, and the gateway, very moving actually. The gateway, if I heard correctly, the gateway for more self-love is actually loving others. So Karim, we've talked quite a lot, you talk quite a lot about the self side, because I asked you that. But again, self and other, they're very connected, of course. So how has your pain affected your relationships, and then how have you worked with that yourself? And again, I understand that kind of self and other, they're not kind of separate topics, as it were. So anything you'd like to speak to there?
Yeah, I think like Tom, the loving self is always more challenging than others, and that's still a work in progress. I think it's tremendously better than it was 7, 8, 9 years ago, but still a work in progress. I think with relationships, when it comes to relationships with others, as Tom also mentioned, every single one of those relationships was strained in one way, or another, by the pain. Still is today. If I have a flare up, then the kids kind of know to avoid me, and Becca will create conditions that will minimize conflict in the house. So there's definitely pain leads to strain, and I think that you lash out a lot more easily. Your patience wears thin. You're just in a resentment. Tom mentioned resentment, frustration, anger, all those things. So that kind of colors your interactions, I think, with other people, whether they be loved ones you share a household with, or colleagues, or friends. So definitely there are a lot of strained relationships. I think with a lot of friends, the strain came from just not seeing them. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go out on a hike, or even go for lunch or dinner, and sporting activities were out of the question completely. So you can very easily slip into the shadows, and then of course you can concoct a narrative about that too, right? That you've got no friends and people don't want to hang out with you. Well, you can understand it. The 10th time your friend asks you if you want to come and do something, you say no, they're probably not going to ask you again the 11th. So even the invitations start to dry up.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a whole, there's the strain in terms of the interactions that are colored by the pain, and then I think there's a strain of just not seeing people or not doing things with them anymore. So the bond becomes, can become a little weaker. So for sure, the getting back on my feet, which was, mindfulness was just shifting perspective, changing relationship with the pain. Then there were other things that happened to help me get back on my feet and get active again. But all, I think, down to that foundation of mindfulness. So just by virtue of getting back on my feet and showing up for life again, participating in life, a lot of those friendships were rekindled. I was in a better mental state, and therefore I was, I think, just nicer to be around. It's funny because colleagues have told me that I've really changed, and I don't think I was aware of the changes or noticed them as much as maybe others have. So I think it's really interesting to ask people regularly on these journeys, like, how do you think I'm doing? Have you noticed any changes? I've always, whether it's with my patience or my judgment or whatever. So colleagues did mention that I'd become a lot more patient, a lot more gentle in some of my interactions. I can be quite a taskmaster and I've led various teams, and I can be a bit tough there. But I found a more gentle side. I've become a lot more patient, a lot more compassion for others, which is great. within my family, there were some relationships that I think improved dramatically as well through the mindfulness. I'm not sure if these people are going to watch this, so I'll be careful what I say. But all positive. No, I mean, one in particular, I'll share just a quick example. So my dad has suffered has many medical conditions. He's on dialysis, has been for the last 4 years. So he had a cancer and kidney taken, all this kind of stuff. So pretty serious medical state that he's in. And I don't think I know that it's my practice that has led me now to come forward as a live donor for him,
Wow.
which was probably out of the question, 4 or 5 years ago. Not because of any, I think, difficulties in our relationship. We have a pretty good relationship. Of course, there are challenges like any father-son relationship, but more because the compassion just ramped up. And prior to that, I would have attached a lot of expectations to doing something like this, and a lot of conditions. And okay, if I'm going to give him my kidney, then he better start eating well, exercising well, sleeping better, all of these things, and take damn good care of it. And those all dissipated and dissolved. And I think I realized that if I'm going to do this, the intention of doing it is so important, and it being unconditional is so important. And I don't think that would have been possible to make that unconditional offer just a few years ago. And I really credit the practice with that. So yeah, again, transformative. I don't want to.
But that is what you
overuse
described
the
there
word.
is remarkable, very remarkable, and so honest, Kareem. Thank you. So it's so human. If I'm going to give you my kidney, there are all these unconscious or
Oh
semi-conscious
yeah.
conditions
And it's
attached.
not just you; it's other people. You've got friends and family and others telling you don't.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, lifestyle issues. This is not a good idea. And then you realize, yeah, that's where I was, but that's not why I'm doing it anymore. I'm
And I
not
think as
doing
well,
it.
you're really exemplifying how mindfulness is awareness. You become more aware of, oh, I've got all these strings attached, and
Yeah.
then it might be that an aware decision might be, well, therefore I cannot do this. That the outcome
Yes.
is I'm not ready to do this. That will
Yeah.
be a perfectly reasonable outcome, or the outcome might be actually I can let go. I can let go of enough of that stuff for me to be able to do this genuinely, generously, with honesty and integrity. So that's a beautiful example of,
Can,
you know,
can I just say, because I think you've raised a really good point there, I'm not saying that anyone listening who has a family member who needs an organ should go out there and give it to them.
yeah,
I
good.
think you hit the nail on the head when you said the awareness, the outcome of that awareness may be actually the decision not to do it,
Yeah,
because your health may not permit you to do it, or your life situation or your age, whatever. So I think that's really important. I think it's just, the awareness brings you to the right outcome,
yeah.
if I can just use that word,
Yeah, no, I
right.
think that's good. Yeah, or an authentic sort of
Yes.
um, aligned outcome where one's actions and one's sort of inner world are more aligned. And of course, for many humans, they're not very aligned,
Yeah.
our sort of actions and inner world. So brilliant. So thank you so much for, it's a very, very, very important topic, but often we have to be quite open and honest when we're talking about love, relationship, self, and other. And I really appreciate your authenticity, your self awareness, and your offering for our listeners. Thank you.